They broke into my property at dawn with bolt cutters, trying to steal a boat that belonged to my dead grandfather. What they didn't know? I legally own the entire lake they're standing on. Picture this. Tuesday morning, 6 a.m. I'm watching through my kitchen window as Karen Brightwater, the HOA president who moved here 3 years ago, leads 2 board members and a sheriff's deputy toward my dock. The morning mist clings to Lake Meridian like a shroud, and there's this bone-deep creak of 40-year-old dock planks as they approach my grandfather's 1985 cabin cruiser. Karen's waving around a piece of paper like it's some kind of weapon. A notice demanding I remove my eyesore boat within 72 hours, or face $500 daily fines. She's about to discover she just declared war on a Navy veteran who inherited more than just a boat. What would you do if some power-hungry HOA tried to steal your family's legacy? Drop your worst nightmare below. Where are you watching from? Your HOA drama probably makes this look like child's play. My name is Marcus Wendell, 52 years old, retired Navy engineer, and apparently the biggest thorn in Karen Brightwater's side since she moved to our quiet Lake Meridian community 3 years ago with big city dreams and an even bigger attitude. Let me paint you the picture of how this war started. Lake Meridian sits 90 minutes west of Denver, a pristine 200-acre jewel surrounded by 47 homes that grew up around the original homesteads. My grandfather Clifford bought what the locals called worthless swampland back in 1982 for $8,000. About what Karen probably spends on her monthly Botox appointments. Clifford was a carpenter who believed in doing things right the first time. Spent 2 summers hand-building our cabin and that dock, using cedar planks that still smell like Christmas morning when the sun hits them just right. He'd tell me stories about fighting off mosquitoes the size of hummingbirds while driving those support posts into the lake bed with nothing but a sledgehammer and pure stubbornness. The community was different then. Families who worked with their hands, kids who knew how to bait their own hooks, neighbors who'd help you move a refrigerator without expecting anything back except maybe a cold beer and a good story. But things change. Enter Karen Brightwater, real estate agent, HOA president, and the kind of person who probably has her pool boy sign a non-disclosure agreement. She arrived from Denver with her BMW, her architectural opinions, and a vision to transform our little slice of heaven into some kind of exclusive resort community. First time we met, she was standing in my driveway wearing enough lavender perfume to choke a moose, pointing at my grandfather's boat like it was a dead raccoon. That eyesore is bringing down property values, she announced, not even bothering with introductions. I showed her the boat registration current, the dock permits legal since 1983, the property surveys all recorded and filed properly with Jefferson County. I don't care about your paperwork, she said, and I swear the woman actually stamped her foot like a toddler. We have community standards now. That's when I knew we had a problem. See, Karen wasn't just complaining about my boat. She was testing the waters, so to speak, to see how much she could push around the original families before we'd push back. Her plan became clear over the following months. She'd formed this HOA in 2018 with a bunch of newer residents Denver transplants who saw dollar signs instead of memories when they looked at our lake. The goal was simple. Pressure the longtime families to sell cheap, then flip the properties to wealthy buyers who'd pay premium prices for exclusive lakefront living. My boat was just the opening move. 3 other original families started getting similar harassment letters about aesthetic violations and community enhancement fees. The Hendersons got cited for their vegetable garden being inconsistent with planned community vision. The Torinos were told their kids' tire swing was a liability issue. But here's what Karen didn't understand about Navy veterans. We don't fold under pressure. We dig in. And when someone tries to steal something that belongs to us, something our grandfathers built with their own hands, we fight back with everything we've got. I use that boat every weekend for fishing, checking water quality, clearing debris after storms. It's not just transportation. It's a floating piece of family history. Those tackle boxes still hold my grandfather's favorite lures, the ones he swore could catch fish in a bathtub. The smell of marine diesel mixed with old leather from his fishing vest still clings to the cabin. Stronger than Karen's perfume and infinitely more honest. She filed her first formal HOA complaint on a Tuesday. By Friday, I was crumpling that cheap copy paper between my weathered fingers, feeling it disintegrate like her chances of intimidating me into submission. But Karen Brightwater was just getting started. And so was I. The real question wasn't whether she could force me to move my boat. The question was, what would happen when she discovered exactly what she was really trying to steal? Karen's first real power play came exactly 1 week after our driveway confrontation. She called an emergency HOA board meeting on a Thursday evening, timing it perfectly when most of the working families couldn't attend, but her retired Denver transplant friends could stack the room like a rigged poker game. I showed up anyway, still wearing my work clothes and smelling like the honest sweat of a man who'd spent the day fixing Mrs. Patterson's dock for free. The community center reeked of expensive cologne and entitlement, as Karen stood at the front with a PowerPoint presentation that probably cost more to make than my grandfather's entire boat. Slide 1, she announced with the confidence of someone who'd never been told no. Community Beautification Initiative, maintaining property values through aesthetic standards. The proposal was elegant in its cruelty. All watercraft would need to meet visual compatibility requirements with annual inspections costing $500. Boats over 20 years old would require comprehensive restoration to modern standards, basically code for spend 10 grand or get out. And here's the kicker. A new $2,000 annual watercraft assessment for the privilege of keeping your boat on community waters. 23 newer residents nodded along like bobbleheads while the 7 original families sat in stunned silence. Karen had done her homework, bringing charts showing how similar improvements had increased property values in Aspen and Vail by 30%. But 2 could play the research game. I'd spent the previous week at the Jefferson County Courthouse, diving through filing cabinets that smelled like decades of bureaucratic dust and broken dreams. My Navy training had taught me that intelligence gathering wins more battles than firepower, and what I found in those musty records made me smile for the first time since this whole mess started. Turned out Karen's little voting scheme had a fatal flaw. Back when I was stationed in Norfolk, I'd helped a buddy fight an illegal HOA assessment, and I remembered the lawyer explaining that Colorado requires approval from 67% of all homeowners, not just whoever shows up to vote for new fees or major rule changes. Karen's meeting had maybe 30 people in a community of 47 homes. Simple math, but apparently beyond her real estate license education. The real bombshell was buried in the original incorporation documents. The HOA formation in 2018 was missing signatures from 8 of the original homesteads, including mine. Those signatures weren't just suggestions, they were legal requirements that turned Karen's entire power structure into an expensive house of cards. I waited until Karen finished her presentation before standing up. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like angry wasps as I cleared my throat. Ms. Brightwater, I have a question about your legal authority to impose these fees. Her smile faltered just slightly. The HOA board has full discretionary power over community standards, Mr. Wendell. Actually, you don't. I pulled out a manila folder thick with photocopied documents. Your 2018 incorporation is invalid. You're missing required signatures from 15% of original homeowners as mandated by Colorado Revised Statutes 38 to 33.3201. The room went dead quiet except for that buzzing light and the sound of Karen's world starting to crack. Her lawyer, some slick guy she'd brought from Denver, whispered frantically in her ear while flipping through papers like a man looking for a life preserver on a sinking ship. Furthermore, I continued, enjoying the way her face was turning the color of an overripe tomato. The original homesteads have perpetual waterfront access rights that predate your organization by 36 years. That's when Karen showed me exactly what kind of person I was dealing with. Instead of backing down or admitting defeat, she went nuclear. Mr. Wendell, she said, her voice sharp enough to cut glass, I've received multiple complaints about your aggressive behavior toward community members. Your military background concerns many residents who fear for their safety. Yet the accusation hit the room like a physical blow. Me? Aggressive? I'd helped half these people move furniture, fix their plumbing for free, taught their kids to fish. But I could see it working on the newer residents, the subtle poison that maybe the veteran was unstable, dangerous, one bad day away from snapping. In fact, Karen continued, sensing blood in the water, I'll be filing a formal harassment complaint with the sheriff's office. We have documentation of you intimidating neighbors with questions about HOA legitimacy. Brilliant and evil in equal measure. Turn my research into stalking, my legal questions into threats. Make the victim into the aggressor while positioning herself as the concerned citizen protecting innocent families from the dangerous ex-soldier. Deputy Jim Torino, whose family had lived here almost as long as mine, caught me in the parking lot afterward. The gravel crunched under our boots as he lit a cigarette with hands that had worked construction for 30 years. Watch yourself, Marcus, he said quietly. Karen's got connections downtown, political friends who owe her favors from her real estate deals. As I drove home that night, my headlights cutting through mountain darkness, I found something slipped under my windshield wiper. A note on plain white paper. Check the lake deed. Not everything is what it seems. A friend. The game was just getting interesting. That anonymous note burned in my pocket for 3 days before I worked up the courage to follow its advice. Something about check the lake deed felt like opening Pandora's box. Once you look, there's no going back to blissful ignorance. Karen didn't waste time licking her wounds from the board meeting. Within 48 hours, she'd escalated faster than a fire in an ammunition depot. She organized something called the Lake Meridian Improvement Committee, with a $50,000 budget raised from newer residents who apparently had money to burn on HOA revenge fantasies. The first sign of her new strategy appeared on a Tuesday morning. Private security boats patrolling the lake like we were some kind of drug smuggling operation. 2 guys in matching polo shirts and wraparound sunglasses, circling in a sleek speedboat that probably cost more than most people's cars. They'd idle near my dock for 20 minutes at a time, taking photos and making notes on waterproof clipboards. Then came the signs. Big orange warnings posted around every communal area. No unauthorized watercraft. Violators will be prosecuted. The legal language was impressive for something that had zero actual authority, but Karen was betting most people wouldn't know the difference between official and expensive looking. I knew I needed professional help, so I followed that mysterious tip and drove to the state archives in Denver. The building smelled like old paper and government coffee, and the clerk who helped me looked like she'd been there since Colorado achieved statehood. "You want the original land surveys from 1981? She asked, peering at me over reading glasses held together with electrical tape. "Those are in the basement vault. Nobody's requested those files in probably 15 years. The manila folders she brought up were thick as phone books and covered in enough dust to make me sneeze. But buried in all that bureaucratic paperwork was a piece of information that made my jaw drop harder than a lead anchor. Back in my Navy days, I'd learned that property disputes often come down to who has the oldest, most accurate documentation. GPS technology has revealed thousands of boundary errors from the pre-satellite era, sometimes shifting property lines by hundreds of feet and costing landowners fortunes they never knew they had. What I found in those archives would have made Karen faint if she'd known. The original 1981 land survey showed Lake Meridian's boundaries were incorrectly recorded in every deed filed after 1983. Modern GPS coordinates revealed that what everyone thought was one large lake was actually 2 separate water bodies, divided by an underwater ridge that you could only see on the original topographical maps. Lake Meridian North, where all the fancy houses and Karen's future marina development were planned. And Lake Meridian South, a smaller, pristine body of water that, according to the deed I was staring at in disbelief, my grandfather hadn't just bought lakefront property on. He'd bought the entire damn thing. All water rights, mineral rights, and access easements for Lake Meridian South, the deed read in faded typewriter ink. Clifford Wendell hadn't just been a smart bargain hunter. He'd been a visionary who understood that owning water in Colorado was like owning liquid gold. But Karen was too busy playing dictator to do actual research. Her security escalation kicked into overdrive that same week. Suddenly, there were surveillance cameras appearing overnight, pointing directly at my dock like I was running some kind of terrorist cell instead of just trying to fish in peace. The $500 daily fines officially began, delivered by certified mail with the persistence of a bill collector and twice the venom. That's when Karen made her biggest mistake yet. She started spreading rumors around town that I was a mentally unstable veteran who might be planning violence against the community. The whisper campaign was subtle but effective, concerned comments at the grocery store, worried conversations at the gas station, always framed as caring about everyone's safety. I consulted with an attorney through the Veterans Legal Aid Program, a sharp woman who'd fought water rights cases across the western states for 20 years. She explained something that made my Navy heart sing with tactical joy. In Colorado and most western states, water rights follow the prior appropriation doctrine, which means the first person to put water to beneficial use has absolute priority over everyone who comes after. First in time, first in right, a principle that traced back to the Gold Rush era and was still rock-solid law today. The attorney confirmed what those dusty archives had revealed. I didn't just own a boat slip or lake access. I owned the lake bed, the water column, and every single recreational usage right for the entire southern section of Lake Meridian. That night, as I sat on my grandfather's dock listening to the gentle lap of water that apparently belonged to me, I could smell diesel fuel contaminating the pristine air. Karen's security boats were leaking fuel into water they had no legal right to patrol, violating both my property rights and probably half a dozen environmental regulations. The crunch of gravel in my driveway interrupted my thoughts. Unmarked cars had been driving by my cabin every hour since the rumors started, and red laser dots from surveying equipment danced across the lake surface like some kind of high-tech light show. Karen thought she was tightening the noose. She had no idea she was walking into a trap 40 years in the making. Karen's next move proved she'd completely lost her mind. On a peaceful Saturday morning while I was hosting a family barbecue for my nephew's birthday, a process server showed up with a restraining order claiming I'd threatened her at the public meeting. Picture this: 12 family members, including 3 kids under 10, watching Uncle Marcus get served legal papers while hamburgers burned on the grill. The server, a kid who looked barely old enough to shave, stammered through his spiel about staying 500 feet away from Karen while my 8-year-old niece asked why the man was trying to arrest me. Maximum humiliation, perfectly timed. Karen had choreographed this like a Broadway production, and I had to admire the pure malice of it even as my blood pressure spiked high enough to power a small city. But if Karen thought she could embarrass me into submission, she'd seriously underestimated what 40 years of dealing with military bureaucracy teaches a man about patience and methodical planning. While she was busy calling Denver TV stations about the troubled veteran terrorizing a peaceful community, I was quietly building the kind of documentation that wins court cases. Every harassment incident got photographed, time-stamped, and GPS coordinated. Every conversation got recorded perfectly legal in Colorado, where only one party needs to consent. Every witness statement got notarized and filed. I'd learned this approach during a property dispute back in my Virginia Beach days, where a neighbor tried to claim our fence was on his land. Turns out judges love defendants who show up with organized evidence instead of angry stories. Documentation beats emotion every single time in legal proceedings. The professional land survey I commissioned revealed something that made Karen's marina dreams even more impossible than she realized. Not only did I own the smaller lake, my property line extended 50 feet into the larger lake where every single dock on the North Shore was built. Those fancy waterfront homes weren't just near my property, they were partially sitting on it. Karen's smear campaign intensified like a propaganda war. She created a Facebook group called Concerned Lake Meridian Residents and started posting carefully cropped photos of my deteriorating boat and property. The pictures made my grandfather's classic cabin cruiser look like something that washed up after a hurricane, and my rustic cabin appear ready for condemnation. She organized safety patrols, basically HOA vigilantes in matching visors who drove past my cabin every hour like some kind of suburban Gestapo. The psychological harassment was sophisticated and relentless, designed to make me crack under constant pressure. But Karen made one critical error in her intelligence gathering. She approached my neighbor, Ezra Blackstone, thinking the 78-year-old retired school teacher would be easy to manipulate. Ezra had taught 8th grade for 40 years and could spot a con artist from 3 counties away. That woman offered me $200,000 for my cabin, Ezra told me over coffee that tasted like motor oil and wisdom. Cash deal, close in 30 days. Problem is, the county assessor values my place at $70,000 tops. Smart buyers offering triple market value always know something the seller doesn't. Usually that the property sits on oil, contains valuable minerals, or will be worth millions once some development plan goes through. Karen wasn't being generous, she was trying to steal generational wealth from families who'd built this community with their own hands. The harassment escalated beyond psychological warfare into actual sabotage. My mailbox got vandalized 3 times in 1 week, smashed with baseball bats, spray-painted with creative profanity, and once stuffed with dog waste in a paper bag. Classy touches that really showed Karen's sophistication. Then someone contaminated my boat's fuel tank with sugar, causing $1,200 in engine damage. The repair shop mechanic shook his head as he showed me the crystallized mess clogging my fuel injectors. "Seen this before," he said, wiping greasy hands on coveralls that had seen better decades. "Usually happens during messy divorces or neighbor disputes. Sugar don't dissolve in gasoline, just turns everything into expensive syrup." Anonymous calls to the VA claimed I was unstable and triggered wellness checks that brought concerned social workers to my door asking about my mental health. Professional, humiliating, and designed to create an official paper trail supporting Karen's narrative about the dangerous veteran. But Karen's biggest mistake was scheduling an emergency community meeting for Labor Day weekend with one agenda item: final vote on watercraft removal and security enhancement. She was forcing a confrontation, betting that I'd either cave under pressure or do something stupid that would justify her claims about my instability. The acrid smoke from a controlled burn on neighboring property, obviously timed to contaminate my barbecue, mixed with the sticky residue from harassment flyers someone had taped to my truck during the night. The constant drone of security boat engines had destroyed the lake's peaceful mornings, replacing birdsong with the mechanical hum of Karen's paranoia. As I peeled those flyers off my windshield, feeling the adhesive gum up under my fingernails, I realized Karen had handed me the perfect opportunity. She wanted a final showdown? Fine. Time to show her what happens when you corner a Navy veteran who spent 3 months building an airtight case. The phone call that changed everything came from my attorney on a Wednesday morning while I was drinking coffee and watching Karen's security goons circle my lake like sharks in polo shirts. "Marcus, you need to sit down for this," she said, and I could hear papers rustling through the phone. We ran a background check on Karen Brightwater, and she's not just a real estate agent, she's a developer. My coffee mug stopped halfway to my lips. "What do you mean?" "Mountain Vista Properties, that's her company. She's got purchase agreements already signed for 12 lakefront homes, contingent on community improvements being approved. This whole HOA harassment campaign, it's a business plan." The pieces fell into place like a perfectly planned demolition. Karen hadn't moved here for the scenery or community lifestyle. She'd moved here to execute the most sophisticated property theft scheme I'd ever encountered, and I'd been stupid enough to think this was about my boat. My attorney continued reading from what sounded like a thick file. Her investors are a Denver development group with a $50 million budget for something called Lake Meridian Resort and Marina. Man, they're planning to buy out all the original families at depressed prices, then develop luxury condos with a private yacht club charging $500,000 membership fees. I'd seen this playbook before during my Navy days, watching developers circle military bases like vultures whenever closure rumors started. Target the families with the least resources, pressure them into panic sales, then flip the properties for massive profits. It was legal, barely, but it destroyed communities that had taken generations to build. "Here's the part that'll really make you angry," she continued. "Karen needs your boat gone because it proves the original homeowners have legitimate water rights. If people see you using the lake freely, it undermines her whole narrative about needing exclusive access for the resort development." But the real bombshell came when she started reading property records. "Marcus, did you know your grandfather's deed includes something called perpetual easement rights across what's now the main community road?" I nearly dropped the phone. "What does that mean?" "It means Karen's entire development is impossible without your permission. Every truck, every construction crew, every future resort guest would have to cross your land to reach the marina site. You don't just own the lake, you own the only legal access road." The scope of Karen's desperation suddenly made perfect sense. She wasn't just trying to remove an eyesore, she was trying to eliminate the single biggest threat to a $50 million development deal. My grandfather's $8,000 worthless swampland purchase had accidentally checkmated a scheme 40 years in the making. "There's more," my attorney said, and I could hear the satisfaction in her voice. "Lake Meridian South is classified as critical wildlife habitat for Colorado River cutthroat trout. Your grandfather signed a conservation easement in 1984 that provides huge tax breaks but blocks any commercial development forever. Federal environmental protection laws trump local development schemes every single time. Karen could build her marina over my dead body, but she'd have to get past the Endangered Species Act first, a legal battle that would cost millions and take decades to resolve." That's when Karen's lawyer made the call I'd been expecting. The offer was delivered with the subtlety of a mobster in a B-movie. $500,000 cash for a quiet sale, with veiled references to unfortunate accidents that sometimes befell stubborn homeowners who didn't understand community cooperation. 48 hours to decide, he said, before the community took matters into their own hands. I hung up and walked out to my dock, looking across water that apparently belonged to me, protected by laws Karen had never bothered to research. The morning sun turned the lake's surface into liquid gold, and I could smell the clean mountain air that her diesel-burning security boats hadn't managed to contaminate yet. Karen Brightwater had just made the biggest mistake of her scheming life. She'd threatened a Navy veteran who now knew exactly what she was trying to steal. Time to show her what real strategy looked like. The war room I set up in my grandfather's cabin looked like something from a military intelligence operation. If military intelligence operated out of a 1980s wood-paneled living room that smelled like pine needles and 40 years of honest living. 3 folding tables covered with legal documents, survey maps, environmental reports, and a timeline of harassment that would make a federal prosecutor weep with joy. My veterans legal aid attorney had connected me with an environmental law clinic at the University of Colorado, and suddenly I had a team of eager law students treating Karen's scheme like their personal crusade against corporate greed. The lead attorney, a sharp woman named Rebecca Martinez, who'd spent 15 years fighting water rights cases, laid out our strategy with the precision of a surgeon planning heart surgery. "We don't just want to stop Karen," she said, spreading maps across my coffee table. "We want to destroy her entire operation so thoroughly that no developer will ever try this again." First discovery, the underwater archaeological survey. When law students have unlimited time and access to state databases, they find things professional investigators miss. Turns out the lake bottom contained artifacts from a Ute fishing camp dating back 300 years, which triggered federal archaeological protection laws that made Karen's marina development about as legal as building a casino in Yellowstone. I'd learned from my Navy days that environmental regulations are like icebergs. The part you can see is nothing compared to what's hidden underneath. One phone call to the State Historical Preservation Office brought a team of archaeologists who confirmed what the students had found. Lake Meridian South was now protected under the National Historic Preservation Act. Ezra Blackstone turned out to be more than just a friendly neighbor. The man had been organizing community resistance movements since before Karen was born, and within a week he'd created the Original Families Coalition, 7 households representing 40 years of lake history, each family contributing documentation that proved Karen's systematic harassment campaign. "I've been teaching kids for 40 years, Ezra said, adjusting glasses that had seen more school board meetings than most politicians. "You learn to spot bullies early, and the best way to stop them is to make them face consequences in front of everyone they're trying to impress." Deputy Jim Torino quietly provided something even more valuable than moral support: police report numbers. Every false complaint Karen had filed, every harassment allegation, every wellness check she'd triggered was documented in official records that showed a clear pattern of abuse. When law enforcement starts seeing the same complainant filing reports every week, they get suspicious about motives. The media strategy came together like pieces of a jigsaw puzzle. Rebecca had connections with Denver Post environmental reporters who'd covered similar development scandals across Colorado. These journalists specialized in David versus Goliath stories where small communities fought off corporate predators, and Karen's scheme had all the elements of a Pulitzer Prize-winning investigation. "Local newspapers live for stories like this," Rebecca explained while highlighting key points in a legal brief thick enough to stop bullets. "Environmental destruction, veteran harassment, corporate greed, federal law violations, it's everything readers love to hate." The technical documentation phase revealed the scope of Karen's environmental crimes. Water quality tests I'd commissioned showed her security boats had leaked enough fuel to violate the Clean Water Act in 17 different ways. Every patrol created measurable petroleum contamination that could trigger EPA enforcement actions carrying $25,000 daily penalties. I discovered during my own research that any citizen can request EPA water quality violation records for any waterway in America through the Freedom of Information Act. The database search revealed that Lake Meridian had 0 violations until Karen's boats started their patrols, creating a before and after timeline that would make environmental prosecutors dance with joy. GPS coordinates proved Karen's orange warning signs were posted on federal conservation land, making her No Unauthorized Watercraft campaign an illegal occupation of protected habitat. The irony was beautiful. While threatening to have me arrested for trespassing, she'd been committing actual federal crimes every day for 3 months. Financial warfare required different weapons. My attorney calculated damages that made my eyes water. $50,000 in harassment costs, $2.5 million in lost property value from her defamation campaign, plus environmental cleanup costs that could reach 6 figures. Karen's Mountain Vista Properties was about to face lawsuits that would make her $50 million development fund disappear faster than morning mist. The Colorado Real Estate Commission complaint was my personal favorite. Real estate agents can lose their licenses for undisclosed conflicts of interest, and Karen had been negotiating home purchases while simultaneously harassing the same homeowners through her HOA position. Professional ethics violations that would end her career even if she beat the criminal charges. The evidence compilation filled 3 banker's boxes with 847 photographs, 23 hours of legal audio recordings, and financial records proving Karen's company had pre-purchased development permits before she'd even moved to our community. As I organized the final folders, breathing in the familiar smell of fresh ink and legal documents, I felt the smooth weight of business cards from New Allies attorneys, environmental groups, investigative reporters, and federal agents who'd built careers destroying schemes exactly like Karen's. The trap was set. Now I just had to wait for her to walk into it. Karen's desperation hit a whole new level when she realized her Labor Day deadline was approaching and I wasn't backing down. Desperate people make stupid mistakes, and Karen was about to make enough mistakes to fill a federal indictment. The first sign came at 3 a.m. on a Tuesday, when my new infrared security cameras, caught 3 figures dumping motor oil near my dock. The night vision footage was clear as day, Karen herself along with 2 HOA board members, pouring automotive waste into pristine lake water while wearing dark clothing like some kind of suburban eco-terrorist cell. I'd installed those cameras after learning a hard lesson during my Norfolk days: always document everything when dealing with people who think rules don't apply to them. The infrared system captured not just their faces but the license plate of Karen's BMW as they fled the scene like guilty teenagers after a prank gone wrong. By 6 a.m., I'd uploaded the footage to a secure cloud server and sent copies to my attorney, Deputy Torino, and the EPA's Environmental Crimes Hotline. In Colorado, security cameras on your own property can record 24/7 legally, and what they'd recorded was enough to charge Karen with criminal environmental destruction. But Karen wasn't done digging her own grave. That same morning, she filed a false report with the EPA claiming I was polluting the lake with boat fuel. The irony was so thick you could spread it on toast. While she was literally dumping motor oil into water she didn't own, she was accusing me of the same crime. The EPA inspector who responded was a no-nonsense woman who'd been investigating environmental crimes since before Karen discovered her first tube of mascara. She took one look at my pristine boat maintenance records and water quality testing, then started asking very pointed questions about the fresh oil slick near my dock that definitely didn't come from my fuel tank. "Sir," she said, kneeling by the water's edge with testing equipment that looked expensive enough to buy a small car, "this petroleum signature doesn't match marine diesel. This is automotive motor oil, and it was dumped here recently." Karen's political pressure campaign escalated into something that would make totalitarian dictators proud. She contacted county commissioners claiming I was a dangerous veteran who threatened community safety, organized a petition demanding psychiatric evaluation, and even planted fake online reviews claiming my military service was dishonorable. But every move she made created more evidence for my legal team. The fake reviews violated federal laws about defaming veterans. The psychiatric evaluation demand could be considered harassment under Colorado disability rights statutes, and the county commissioners started getting suspicious when the same woman kept filing complaints about the same man every week. The collection agency Karen hired to pursue HOA fines made their own contribution to my case by attempting to place a lien on my property through a fraudulent HOA board vote. Problem was, you can't lien property that isn't subject to HOA authority, and the attempt created a paper trail of intentional property theft that would make prosecutors smile. I'd learned during a previous property dispute that liens can be challenged within 30 days in most states, and false liens carry serious penalties, including attorney's fees and punitive damages. Karen's lien attempt wasn't just illegal, it was stupid enough to justify federal mail fraud charges. My homeowner's insurance company launched their own investigation into the accidental boat damage, and their fraud investigator was a former FBI agent who'd built a career recognizing patterns. Within a week, she'd connected my case to similar suspicious incidents across Karen's previous development projects in 3 other Colorado communities. "Mr. Wendell," she said during our kitchen table interview, "your situation isn't unique. We've documented identical harassment patterns in Breckenridge, Steamboat Springs, and Grand Junction. Same developer, same tactics, same mysterious accidents befalling anyone who won't sell." The harassment campaign reached absurd levels when Karen's supporters began parking cars to block my driveway access, making harassing phone calls every hour around the clock, and posting my military records online in violation of federal veteran privacy laws. Each incident got documented, recorded, and added to a growing file that looked like evidence for a racketeering case. But the most satisfying moment came when the Denver Post reporter I'd contacted published the first article in what would become an investigative series on HOA abuse. The headline read, "Veteran Harassment Scheme Targets Military Families Across Colorado," and Karen's carefully constructed public image began crumbling faster than a house built on lake ice. Environmental groups provided documentation of similar illegal development schemes, and TV news crews started filming around the lake like we were some kind of nature documentary about corporate predators in their natural habitat. The constant hum of news drones mixed with the acrid smell of flash powder from photographer equipment, creating an atmosphere that felt like a crime scene investigation. My attorney filed the formal complaint with Colorado's Attorney General about HOA fraud, documenting financial damages from lost work due to constant legal harassment, medical bills from stress-related health issues, and security expenses that were draining my Navy pension faster than Karen could say community standards. The media investigation was building momentum like an avalanche, and Karen was standing directly in its path. Karen's final desperate gambit proved she'd completely lost touch with reality. She hired a private investigator to dig up dirt on my military service, apparently believing she could find some scandal that would justify her months of harassment. What she found instead was enough heroic documentation to make her look like she was attacking Captain America. The PI's report, which I obtained through my attorney's discovery process, read like a military commendation ceremony. Navy Cross for saving 12 sailors during a shipboard fire off the coast of Somalia. Multiple environmental cleanup commendations for restoring contaminated sites at 3 different bases. Exemplary service record spanning 22 years without a single disciplinary action. But here's where Karen's desperation turned into outright criminality. She attempted to bribe Deputy Torino to file a false arrest warrant against me. The conversation happened in the parking lot of Miller's Hardware, where Jim had stopped to buy fence posts, and Karen cornered him with an envelope containing $5,000 in cash. "Just file a domestic disturbance report," she pleaded, according to the recording Jim made on his phone. "Say you received an anonymous tip about violent threats. We'll sort out the details later." Jim Torino had been a cop for 15 years and recognized attempted bribery when he heard it. He also knew that recording such attempts is not only legal in Colorado, but practically mandatory when dealing with someone systematically trying to frame innocent people. The FBI Environmental Crimes Unit opened their case after reviewing Karen's pattern of harassment across multiple state lines. Turns out her Mountain Vista properties had been running identical schemes in Utah, Wyoming, and New Mexico, targeting veteran and fixed-income homeowners with surgical precision. What I thought was personal harassment was actually a federal criminal enterprise. Karen's Denver investors pulled their funding faster than tourists fleeing a wildfire once the FBI investigation became public. $50 million in development money evaporated overnight when newspaper headlines started reading "Federal Investigation into Veteran Harassment Scheme" and "Environmental Crimes Linked to Development Fraud." Smart money runs when federal agents start asking questions, and Karen's carefully constructed house of cards collapsed with the dramatic flair of a controlled demolition. 2 HOA board members resigned, citing ethical concerns about Karen's methods, which was politician speak for, "We're jumping off this sinking ship before the FBI interviews reach us." When board members start abandoning ship, the scheme is usually beyond salvage. The whistleblower who brought down Karen's entire operation turned out to be her own assistant, a young woman named Sarah, who'd been documenting Karen's illegal activities for months while secretly cooperating with federal investigators. Sarah provided recordings of Karen admitting to environmental vandalism, property fraud, and conspiracy to harass veterans. "She told me to frame you for environmental violations," Sarah testified during the deposition that would eventually send Karen to federal prison. "She wanted to plant evidence of fuel leaks near your dock, then call the EPA to report you. When I refused, she threatened to fire me and ruin my real estate career." The national media picked up the story with the enthusiasm of sharks sensing blood in the water. HOA harassment of war hero became a cable news sensation, complete with environmental groups organizing a Save Lake Meridian campaign that attracted supporters from across the country. My GoFundMe for legal expenses raised $75,000 in 48 hours from people who'd suffered similar HOA abuse. Karen's alliance crumbled like a sandcastle at high tide. The private security company stopped patrolling after learning they'd been operating without proper permits on protected federal land. The collection agency backed off when they realized the liens they'd filed were fraudulent. Even Karen's Denver lawyer quietly withdrew from the case after reviewing the mountain of evidence against his client. In her final act of desperation, Karen confronted me at Miller's Hardware, the same place where she'd tried bribing Deputy Torino. She was waiting by my truck when I came out with a load of dock repair materials, her face twisted with the kind of rage that comes from watching $50 million in dreams turn into federal felony charges. "This is all your fault," she screamed loud enough for half the town to hear. "You could have just moved your stupid boat, but you had to ruin everything." 3 store customers and the parking lot security camera captured her threatening me with physical violence, promising that I'd regret destroying her life, and warning that accidents happen to people who don't know when to quit. That night, someone spray-painted "Traitor" across my truck in letters big enough to read from space. The store's security footage showed Karen's BMW arriving at 2 a.m. and leaving 5 minutes later, providing enough evidence for vandalism charges that would violate the conditions of her bail. As I called Deputy Torino to report the latest crime, breathing in the acrid fumes of spray paint that still clung to my truck's metal surface, I realized Karen had finally given me the perfect setup for our final confrontation. She'd scheduled one last community vote to remove dangerous elements, planning to present falsified evidence and force a conclusion to this war. Fine by me. Time to end this once and for all. The Lake Meridian Community Center had never seen anything like the circus that descended on Labor Day evening. 200 people crammed into a space designed for 50, with news cameras from 4 Denver stations, environmental reporters from 3 national publications, and federal agents observing from the back of the room like silent sentinels of justice. Karen had no idea she was walking into her own execution. She'd spent the week preparing what she thought would be her final victory presentation, complete with falsified water quality reports showing contamination from my boat and staged photos claiming environmental damage. The woman actually believed she could lie her way out of federal charges while FBI agents were literally taking notes 6 feet away. I sat in the front row with my legal team, watching Karen set up her PowerPoint presentation with the confidence of someone who'd never faced real consequences for anything in her privileged life. The projector screen flickered to life with her opening slide. Protecting our community, final actions against environmental threats. Ladies and gentlemen, Karen announced with the dramatic flair of a prosecutor closing a murder case. Tonight, we vote to permanently remove the environmental hazard that threatens our beautiful lake community. She clicked to her first fabricated photo, my grandfather's boat, with what appeared to be oil stains digitally added to the water around it. The image was impressive enough to fool casual observers, but she'd made one critical error. She'd photoshopped pollution into water that belonged to me, not the community. As you can see, Karen continued, pointing at her fake evidence with a laser pointer that shook slightly in her trembling hands, this vessel has been leaking petroleum products into our pristine waters for months. That's when I stood up, and the room went dead silent except for the whir of news cameras swiveling to capture what everyone sensed would be the moment this whole circus reached its climax. Ms. Brightwater, I said, my voice carrying the calm authority that 22 years of Navy service teaches you, I have a question about your jurisdiction to regulate my property. Her laser pointer stopped mid-gesture. The HOA has full authority over community waters, Mr. Wendell. Actually, you don't. I walked to the front of the room and connected my laptop to the projector, replacing Karen's lies with legal truth. Because those aren't community waters. The first document that filled the screen was my grandfather's original 1982 deed, signed and notarized in ink that had faded but never lied. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like you to meet the legal owner of Lake Meridian South, my grandfather, Clifford Wendell, who purchased not just lakefront property, but the entire body of water you've been fighting about. Gasps echoed through the room like a thunderclap. Karen's face went white as fresh snow as the implications hit her like a freight train loaded with 40 years of legal consequences. Furthermore, I continued, advancing to the next slide showing the professional survey results, your marina development would be built entirely on my private property, which explains why you've been so desperate to drive me away. The room erupted in confused chatter as people realized they'd been watching Karen try to steal millions of dollars in lakefront property through an elaborate HOA harassment scheme. News cameras captured every moment of her world collapsing in real time. That's impossible, Karen shrieked, abandoning all pretense of professional composure. Those documents are fabricated by a veteran conspiracy. Deputy Torino stepped forward with the calm satisfaction of a man who'd been waiting months for this moment. Ms. Brightwater, you're under arrest for attempted bribery of a law enforcement officer, environmental crimes, and conspiracy to commit fraud. The handcuffs clicking shut around Karen's wrists provided the most satisfying sound I'd heard since my discharge ceremony. But the real mic drop moment came when the EPA agent stood up and announced the criminal investigation into her development company. Mountain Vista Properties is under federal investigation for environmental fraud, veteran harassment, and racketeering across 4 states, Agent Martinez declared while Karen struggled against handcuffs that weren't budging. We've documented a pattern of targeting military families and fixed-income homeowners through systematic HOA abuse. The FBI agent joined the party by serving warrants for Karen's financial records related to the harassment scheme. Turns out federal agencies had been building a comprehensive case that would likely result in 5 to 10 years of federal prison time. But my favorite moment came when I made my final announcement. I'm offering to sell lake access easements to legitimate community members for $1 each, and I'm establishing the Clifford Wendell Memorial Wildlife Preserve to protect this lake forever. The standing ovation from original families and sympathetic newer residents drowned out Karen's screaming protests as news cameras captured her perp walk through a crowd of people she'd spent months terrorizing. Her million-dollar development dreams evaporated like morning mist, replaced by federal felony charges and permanent disgrace. Environmental groups announced Lake Meridian as a model for community-led conservation, while the Denver Post reporter told me her investigation series was being submitted for a Pulitzer Prize. Karen Brightwater had picked a fight with the wrong Navy veteran, and now the whole world was watching her pay the price. Justice served, with a side of permanent humiliation. 6 months later, I'm sitting on my grandfather's dock watching the sunrise paint Lake Meridian in shades of gold and possibility, breathing air that no longer reeks of diesel fuel from harassment patrol boats. The silence is broken only by the gentle lap of clean water against cedar planks and the occasional splash of a Colorado River cutthroat trout, the same endangered species that helped send Karen to federal prison. Karen Brightwater pled guilty to 17 federal charges and received 18 months in federal prison plus $200,000 in restitution. Her real estate license was permanently revoked, and Mountain Vista Properties dissolved in bankruptcy after facing lawsuits from investors who'd lost $50 million backing her fraudulent schemes. The harassment lawsuit I filed against her settled for $1.2 million money that bought me peace of mind and funded something even better. When federal plea bargains move quickly, it usually means the evidence was overwhelming enough to make fighting pointless, and Karen's lawyers knew they were representing a client caught red-handed by FBI surveillance. The new HOA board, elected from a mix of original families and reasonable newer residents, operates under bylaws that require transparency, fairness, and actual legal authority before making decisions. Property values increased 40% after Lake Meridian received Colorado's first Community Protected Watershed designation, proving that conservation can be more profitable than destruction. I used the settlement money to restore my grandfather's cabin into a family retreat that honors his memory while serving the community he loved. The University of Colorado established a lake ecology research station in partnership with our community, providing ongoing environmental monitoring at no cost while giving graduate students hands-on experience protecting pristine ecosystems. Lake Meridian now serves as a model for 15 other communities fighting similar development pressure across Colorado and neighboring states. My grandfather's $8,000 investment in worthless swampland became the cornerstone of a conservation movement that protects thousands of acres from corporate predators who mistake rural communities for easy targets. The Governor's Environmental Protection Award sits on my mantle next to my grandfather's fishing photos, a reminder that sometimes the best way to honor the past is to protect the future. Original families saw their property values soar thanks to permanent conservation protection, while the Veteran Property Rights Legal Fund I established helps other harassment victims fight back against HOA abuse. Karen's spectacular downfall became a cautionary tale that inspired Colorado's legislature to pass the HOA Reform Act, requiring independent oversight of harassment complaints and criminal penalties for systematic intimidation. Individual cases often spark broader legal reforms when they expose systemic problems, and Karen's federal prosecution sent a message to developers across the West that targeting veterans carries serious consequences. The first annual Lake Meridian Conservation Festival attracted 2,000 visitors who came to celebrate community-led environmental protection while enjoying fishing, hiking, and educational programs. My grandfather's boat Persistence serves as the festival centerpiece, transformed from Karen's eyesore into a symbol of how ordinary people can defeat corporate schemes through determination and legal preparation. Environmental festivals generate significant tourism revenue for rural communities while educating visitors about conservation success stories, proving that protecting nature can be both morally right and economically smart. Local businesses reported their best sales in decades during festival weekend, with visitors praising the pristine lake and the community that fought to preserve it. Teaching weekend workshops on knowing your property rights has become my retirement passion project, helping other homeowners understand what they actually own before HOA bullies try to steal it. Knowledge sharing creates lasting positive change by preventing future victims, and every property owner who successfully defends their rights makes the next Karen think twice about targeting rural communities. The peace I've found through environmental education and community service feels like the reward my grandfather would have wanted, his worthless swampland purchase, protecting not just our family's legacy, but an entire ecosystem for generations who'll never know Karen Brightwater's name. Last week, I received a letter from a veteran in Montana whose HOA is trying to steal his solar panels through bogus aesthetic violations. Some people never learn, but that's fine by me. Time to make another phone call. What's your worst HOA nightmare? Drop it in the comments, your story might be next. And we love seeing justice served to petty tyrants who forget that Americans don't surrender family property without a fight. Hit subscribe if you enjoyed watching Karen get exactly what she deserved. We've got plenty more stories where David beats Goliath, and trust me, the next one's even better.
Thanks for hanging out with us on HOA Stories, where the HOA Karens meet their match. If this story had you cheering or cringing, go ahead and like the video, drop a comment with your reaction, and hit subscribe so you're ready for the next wild HOA tale.